It is Tuesday, August 2nd here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. And our special guest today is the Jaguars reporter for 1010 AM and 92.5 FM in Jacksonville. He is at Hays Carlyon on Twitter. Hays, thank you very much for joining us today.
Gentlemen, great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, especially with the team busy right now, about to play in the first game of the year at the Hall of Fame this week. We want to know about the Jaguars and, of course, about all the biggest names. This is an offense that Jared and I are actually a little bit excited about for fantasy purposes because they've been going fairly late in terms of average draft position. So for the broad picture, what are the biggest changes that you have seen so far this year's offense versus last year's under Urban Meyer?
I think it's functional and it's creative. And those were two things missing last year. Functional because of the debacle that Urban Meyer was. And then there just wasn't a lot of creativity. And I don't know if I put all of that on Darrell Bevell. I mean, he was dealt a tough hand by the head coach. But it just seems like Doug Pederson has a very firm grasp on what works in today's NFL, how to best utilize Trevor Lawrence. And I do like them from a fantasy standpoint for a lot of these guys because I still don't think they're ready to win more than maybe 7 or 8 games at best. So they're going to be playing from behind, but they're functionally going to be able to do that, which does mean that I think they're not going to have as many wasted possessions and things like that. So while they might not win a lot, they probably will be trailing and able to play pretty well in that time to kind of at least keep the game relatively close.
Does it seem like Trevor Lawrence is already benefiting from having a more functional coaching staff and offense, as you mentioned?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And he handled last year as well as you can. I mean, he was dealt the worst environment. I'm not going to say in league history, but certainly Urban Meyer, I think, is probably the worst head coach that we've seen at this level. And the supporting cast wasn't great around Trevor. So you had sort of nothing really that was working well. Now the supporting cast has been upgraded. It's still not close to being elite, but it's certainly much better. And the difference between Doug Pederson and Urban Meyer is a complete 180. So Trevor's in a much better position, but he's handled it great. He compartmentalized the things that went wrong last year, but he did kind of keep in mind the things that did go well that he was able to individually take away in terms of the positives. And I think that's translated. So I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have a really strong second year.
Yeah, I think Bobby Petrino laughs at Urban Meyer's NFL.
Yeah, Bobby Petrino is now off the hook.
That's right. You mentioned Pederson, knowing how to get the best out of Lawrence, knowing how to use him. Do you think that's going to include any designed rushing stuff? That's something that we like to see in fantasy. Lawrence is a mobile quarterback. Do you expect Pederson to call any of that stuff for him?
I would be surprised. They do have RPOs in there, but I would be surprised if they have Trevor do a lot of design things. He doesn't even really – occasionally he'll use his legs, but I can think of only one occurrence so far in training camp where Trevor just took off and scored from about 6 yards out. So it's there for him from a skill set standpoint, but it is not something that is first, second, or third priority for him as a play goes through. So things pretty much have to break down for Trevor to run. I'm not saying that he won't give you anything from a rushing standpoint, but I would be surprised if they're inside the 5-yard line and he's going to get the chance to score the touchdown there by design. It may happen. He may fall into one or two, but I don't think they're going to use him in that capacity.
Got it. Okay. So getting to the Jags backfield, I think that's the biggest question fantasy owners have at this point. How is James Robinson looking coming off the Achilles tear? I guess, how is Travis Etienne looking coming off his Liz Frank injury? And then how do you expect this backfield to operate as far as, the distribution of carries and targets?
Yeah, I would say that wherever you think Travis Etienne is going to get drafted in your league, bump that up by a round or two. And that's where he should be getting drafted. And I would say the same thing about James Robinson going the other way. Wherever you think James Robinson should be drafted, probably drop a couple rounds down. And that's probably more the value of where he should be. Travis Etienne's look great. The speed is back. The Liz Frank injury was now almost a full year ago. And I was surprised with what he was able to do in OTAs. It's carried over. So Travis Etienne brings a real speed element to the offense. He's an accomplished pass catcher, and they're utilizing him in that fashion. So I think Travis Etienne could have 1,200, 1,400 yards of offense this year, really have a big season. James Robinson, I think, will be ready. I think he'll be active for week 1 at Washington. But I do wonder what the role is going to be. I think initially, if James is fully ready, and he's doing some nice things on the field now, he's not fully back. And Doug Pederson even said today that they're now getting to the point where they're ready to start. It needs to start accelerating for him to get ready. So that'll be interesting to see over the next week what James Robinson does. But I think it is going to be James Robinson may be listed as the starting running back ceremonially, but I think it will be Travis Etienne that is getting the majority of the touches. And as the season goes along, I think that's only going to grow further apart.
Do you think Snoop Connor works into that rotation at all, or is he more of an insurance option at this point?
I think he works in. I think he's going to have a role. I don't know how much right away, but based on the injury history of Etienne and Robinson and what they're dealing with, Snoop Connor presents some pretty good value if you're talking about somebody that's probably coming off the board very late, if at all, depending on your league. So he looks good. He's got good patience. He had a good day yesterday in full pads, good vision. He's got a burst when he hits it, and he's a big guy. So, Snoop Connor, to me, if Etienne and James Robinson stay healthy, it'll be a fairly minimal role. But, you're talking about one guy's coming off an Achilles, one guy's coming off a Liz Frank. And if one of those two can't go, then I think Snoop Connor really is going to get an increased workload. There's really no one behind him that I think is going to push him. So then it would be, do the Jaguars go and sign a veteran back to come in? And so I think Snoop Connor's got some good late round value.
Mm-hmm. Now, the wide receiver core is even more crowded than the backfield that we were just talking about. We've got Christian Kirk. We've got Zay Jones arriving in free agency. Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Laquan Treadwell, of course, still around from last year. Who do you expect to be the two that are on the field when they're in their 2 wideout sets? And then who are the top 3 when they spread to, 3 wide sets?
Yeah, Christian Kirk would be the player you'd want to own. And then I think it's Zay Jones and Marvin Jones, but it's pretty close in terms of the 2 and the 3. So I would say that they're kind of in the same classification. Christian Kirk's look great. Obviously people talk about the big contract. That's understandable, but he looks like a player that is ready to earn that contract. If he stays healthy, I can't imagine he's not going to be in triple digits in terms of targets. And obviously if he's going to get that kind of volume, he's going to produce again with what we believe is going to be a good quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. So the scheme fits him really well. They do a good job moving him around. They do a good job manufacturing touches for him outside of the passing game. They like to give it to Christian Kirk on end arounds and things like that. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't get the occasional carry as well. And so Christian Kirk looks really good. Zay Jones and Marvin Jones are dependable. They look steady. I think from a fantasy standpoint, you're not going to, get anything that's going to help you win your league, but they're, for the NFL, they're steady, reliable 2s and 3s. And, really Evan Ingram, I would say, outside of Christian Kirk, I would think the top 3 that you'd want from a reception standpoint would be Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Travis Etienne.
Is Kirk looking like the most common slot guy?
He does play there. They kind of move him all over the place. So you'll see him on the perimeter. You'll see him in the slot. And so the Jaguars will be able to match him up on whoever they want to match him up on defensively, depending on the opponent. Now, obviously, the defense can counter that, but some won't. So Christian Kirk is somebody that I think on a week-in, week-out basis is going to be pretty protected by the scheme, and that's going to help him. So he's got a lot of things working for him. You like the quarterback, you like the scheme in the head coach, and again, I think you like the circumstance because the Jaguars, again, probably are a 5 to 8 win team. So the majority of the time, they're going to be throwing it late to try and get back in the game or win the game.
Do you think Laviska Shenault will be on this roster come week 1?
I think he will be, but it's going to be a real small package of plays. So I don't think he has a ton of value. I know, he's a former second round pick and that gets guys excited, but I don't think you're going to see any sort of major breakout from Laviska Shenault. I think he'll be on the roster, but I think it's going to be a small package that he's involved in. He does have some value in terms of his ability to run after the catch, his ability to give the offense a creative option in terms of how they want to use him. But I'd be surprised, again, barring injury, I'd be surprised if Laviska Shenault is somebody that's going to generate enough volume to warrant being a fantasy football draft selection.
Right. So you mentioned Evan Ingram playing a big role in the passing game. That is not surprising when you look at Doug Pederson's history. He, tends to target the tight end position at a rate, well above league average. So, it sounds like you expect that to continue with Evan Ingram, who got a pretty nice one-year deal from the Jags. Is he running clear ahead of Dan Arnold? Do you think like Evan Ingram's the clear one, Arnold's the clear two?
Yeah, no question. Evan Ingram is the clear one. And Dan Arnold's a nice player, and he's somebody that if something were to happen to Evan Ingram, Dan Arnold can certainly get in there and produce. But Evan Ingram is going to have a lot of chances for success in this system. He knows it. It's why I think a big reason why he signed with the Jaguars. He saw what Doug Pederson did in the NFC East when he was with the Giants, and Pederson was in Philadelphia. And I think he knew I'm going to have a prove-it year. I need that prove-it year to be somewhere where I know I'm going to get the ball. I think he and Trevor have a really good connection. So I think Evan Ingram, if he can stay healthy, is going to have a big year. He's had some drops in training camp, which is, kind of the book on him. He's also made some really nice plays. And so I think from a Jaguars perspective, who are not used to having explosive tight ends, I think he's going to be a real pleasant addition for the fans. Because yes, he's probably going to drop one or two here and there, but he's also going to make plays that the Jaguars just aren't used to seeing their tight end make.
I love hearing the confirmation on Evan Engram because, for all the things that you just said, the money that they signed him for said it's a prove-it deal, said that they think there's upside there, said that he thinks he can prove it this year. So I like hearing that you're projecting him that high. And I think where you can draft him in fantasy right now, it bakes in any of the risks. We all hate to see drops, but they ultimately don't matter that much. The guys who can also produce stay on the field.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Doug Pederson was even asked about Ingram had one day where he dropped two passes, and so Pederson was asked about it, and he said, "I'm not worried about it." He's like, "I'd rather him do it now than in week one." But they really like what they're seeing at Evan Ingram. So again, these as we know, these guys aren't robots; they're going to make mistakes. But the key is, are they going to come? Is the confidence going to be shaken in the coaching staff? And it hasn't at all been that. Doug Pederson's fully behind Evan Ingram. And I can't imagine, again, if he stays healthy, that he won't have a really big season for the Jaguars.
Oh yeah, I'm getting Evan Engram goosebumps over here, Jared. I gotta close things out on the defense though for the few people that are watching and playing in IDP leagues. So I don't think there are a whole lot of questions that we need answered on the Jacksonville defense for fantasy purposes, but there are some interesting situations in the secondary. The first for me is, what do you think the chances are that Andre Cisco shoves Andrew Wingard aside and takes a starting job next to Rayshon Jenkins to open the season?
He will. It's 99%. If Andre Cisco is healthy, he will start opposite Rayshon Jenkins. That's the way they've done it all throughout training camp. And you see the explosiveness. Inside the building, they really love Andre Cisco. So he's going to start. Again, that was another thing last year that didn't make a lot of sense. They didn't play more. But that staff obviously is gone. Andre Cisco, his ball hawking skills are evident by what he did in college. That has shown up in training camp. He's an explosive athlete back there. And I think Andre Cisco has a great chance. I love fantasy football. I've never played in a league that has defensive players. So I'm going to caution it with, I'm not going to throw around values because I don't have the experience with it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Andre Cisco has, 3 or 4 picks.
Hey, don't worry. You give us the insight and we'll be happy to tell people where to draft them. And Andre Cisco has been somebody that I've been wanting to get that confirmation on. He entered training camp last year coming off a college injury, didn't he? That was kind of hampering him a little bit.
He tore his ACL his last year at Syracuse, but he really, to be honest, wasn't all that limited in training camp. And so there was a lot of encouragement initially, with him being a 3rd-round pick on a bad team, that, this is somebody that is going to make a real impact as a rookie, and they just never played him. And it was like, well, he doesn't know the scheme. They were telling us this in December. It's like, You guys have had him in the building every day since July 26th. How does he not know your scheme by this point? That's a you problem. That's not an Andre Cisco problem. And but again, that staff is gone, and this staff has had him working as a starter since the onset of training camp. And again, he's a young player. Obviously, there's things he hasn't seen yet, but from an athleticism standpoint, he looks really good. And so, but he's absolutely going to be the safety. The only way Andrew Wingard starts is if Cisco gets injured.
The staff was probably like, to be honest, we don't really know our scheme.
Exactly. Andre who?
It's like Michael Scott was running the Jags.
Yeah, exactly.
So my other secondary question is, should we expect the top 3 corners for these Jags to be Shaq Griffin, Tyson Campbell, and Darius Williams?
Yes, absolutely. Darius Williams is still coming back, so he still doesn't go in 11 on 11, but he's going to be the nickel when healthy. And, that's what his contract states. And really the guy that would challenge him is Trey Herndon, who's a savvy veteran, but doesn't have a lot of speed. So Darius Williams will be the nickel. Tyson Campbell looks sensational. He's arguably been the defensive MVP at training camp. Long, fast, really doing a much better job finding the ball than he did as a rookie. So Tyson Campbell's been a big surprise. And Shaq Griffin's very, very solid. He should have had 4 or 5 picks last year, dropped them all, and has really worked on that this offseason. He had a nice interception the other day in red zone drills where there was a ball deflected off of Shaq Quarterman, the linebacker, and he was able to scoop it right off the ground with one hand for the interception. So starting to see a little bit more playmaking out of Shaq Griffin, which is good because he was in position to have a pretty big year last year, and just every single time he had a chance, wasn't able to make the play. But their corners, I think, are pretty sound. But Tyson Campbell, I think, will be the star.
Well, the conventional wisdom is that if you can't catch those, you play defense, and if you can catch them, you play offense, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it proved to be true.
Let me sneak in one more defense question, because I want to know, is Devin Lloyd going to be on the field for all 3 downs?
I think he will be, but right now the thing with Devin Lloyd is he got injured in the conditioning test. He injured his hamstring, so we have yet to see him in training camp. Now, when I saw him in OTAs, he's explosive. You can see why he had 42 tackles behind the line at Utah. I think he's going to be a great player for the Jaguars, but it's a little nerve-wracking that you haven't been able to see him out there yet. We're still obviously several weeks away from the opener, but yes, Devin Lloyd is somebody that he would be on the field for every down, and he's going to have a chance, I think, to make a ton of plays. So if I could guarantee that he's going to be ready, and the buzz is that it's a very minor injury, they're just being cautious because the hamstring by nature is one that as soon as you think it's healed, you go out there and you re-injure it. So I think they really want to give him some extra time because of where we are in the calendar. But if Devin Lloyd is healthy, Devin Lloyd is going to be a big-time producer for the Jaguars.
Awesome. Thank you for the confirmation on that as well.
Sure
he
thing.
is the Jaguars reporter for 1010 AM, 92.5 FM in Jacksonville. He is at Hays Carlyon on Twitter. You should certainly be following him. Hays, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anytime. Take care.
That's going to do it for this episode of our Beat Writer series. You can find every show on our YouTube channel, on Spotify, on Apple, wherever else you want to get your podcasts. And of course, on draftsharks.com. If you head to the website now, you can read my early round bust article that just dropped this morning. We are also constantly updating our projections to match all the news and buzz, like the stuff we heard from Mr. Carlyon today and the rest of the writers that we're having on here. All of that powers the exclusive Draft War Room, so become a DS Insider. You can take advantage of all of that. For our guest, Hays Carlyon, Jared Smola, and the entire Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.